Welcome to Washington State Legends of Soccer and our series Conversations with a Legend Olympics Edition. I'm Frank MacDonald and our producer is Leanne Johnson. Today our guest is Brent Goulet. Brent grew up in Tacoma, attended Foss High School, then became a four-time All-American at Warner Pacific. He'd played for the FC Seattle Storm and the Tacoma Stars, plus a long playing and coaching career in Germany. What we're focusing on today, though, is his involvement with the U.S. Olympic team when he was voted 1987 U.S. Soccer Player of the Year and the 1988 Summer Games in Seoul. So good to see you, Brent. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Frank. It's a pleasure.
We are focusing on the Olympics, but I think we have to kind of set the scene before the 88 games, and that was qualifying, of course. You probably as a underclassman at Warner Pacific were watching or at least hearing about the crowds at the LA Olympics, the big crowds at the Rose Bowl and so on. So there was a little bit of buzz about Olympic soccer, I think, just prior to you joining the U.S. program. So the pro game, on the other hand, had peaked, maybe at least outdoors. So the national team program, though, seemed on the rise. I'm wondering how much exposure you had to the U.S. national team programs, and how did you get identified and into that qualifying team?
Well, you got to look back to 1983. 1983, I was invited down to San Diego. I think it was San Diego for the getting ready for the 84 Olympic team. That was when it was truly the Olympic developmental team. I went straight in from college. And then Manny Shelshite was interim at that time before Alkis Panagoulias came in. Okay. And so I made that final 20 of the amateurs before 84. And then they brought in the professionals for the 84 Olympic team. And I didn't get to play. And so I had to wait till 87 at the end of my college career there after scoring goals, and through Bernie Fagan and Clive Charles being in Portland. I know that through those contacts and having scored goals, I got invited again to the Marlboro Cup in 87 in January. And then scoring in those first games, that launched my career with the national team at that time to get back into it. And then we went through Olympic qualifying. That's how I remember getting into that team at that time.
So as you said, in 1980, we talked to Jeff Stock, a fellow Tacoman. He was in the amateur period, the last amateur Olympics, really, 1980, 84. Again, as you mentioned, they bring in professionals, and so that bumps out the amateurs, which you were still in college, so obviously you're an amateur. So distinguish also what was the difference between the national team and the Olympic team then by that point?
Well, there wasn't at that time, but they wanted to, and they had to make that distinction for the World Cup, because you had the same players playing in the World Cup and the Olympics. For example, 87, all the players on that, 88, all the players on that 87 Erdingen team where I had an offer in Germany, Bayer Erdingen, they were still Bundesliga at that time. Bayer had Bayer Leverkusen and Erdingen at that time. And they had won the UEFA Cup, I believe. And all those national team players at Erdingen were on that 88 Olympic team that we had in Korea. So they had to start making a distinction between Olympics and World Cup for their product at FIFA. Okay. That's the way I remember it.
So Olympic qualifying, I don't know if it was much different. Well, it was different because seemed like it was a series of head-to-heads, knocking out kind of a tournament. What do you remember about the series? How long does it last? How do you grow into that role where you become the top gun?
Yeah, I remember our first away game down in El Salvador. I remember scoring the first goal down there where we won. I believe it was 4-1. And then Hugo Perez being from El Salvador, the heat we took there, but stepping out for the first time and getting that first win away from home there. And I remember that going through qualifications against Trinidad and Tobago and El Salvador at home again in those games. But when we won those games, we had a playoff against Canada. And I don't believe many people remember this because you can't find a lot of the video and everything at that time. Yeah. I believe that's because we're with Adidas and everything's Nike now. Mm-hmm. That's my belief. And so that being said, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, we go up to New Brunswick and we have to play Canada in Canada and we lose 2-0. Mm-hmm. We were on the brink of elimination. And I didn't score in that series. We had other people step up, just like Paul Crumpy coming from the back right and everything. I mean, it was amazing. The players we had at that time that stepped up. And then we came back home and we played in St. Louis, and it was so hot. Frank, it was so hot. And it was a tough game, but by the grace of God, we were able to turn that thing around, not allow a goal, and win 3-0, or not. For me personally, you're not playing in the 84 Olympics, and then you don't qualify for the 88 Olympics. So we won 3-0 to win 3-2 on aggregate, and we got through to the 88 Olympics. And that started that cycle to what it's been all the way up to 2012 before we did not qualify.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, I don't believe you're affiliated with a pro team during that lead up to the 88 games. So I'm wondering, any idea what you were making or what kind of a stipend U.S. Soccer was on in those pre-94 World Cup days?
Well, I just remember coming back and my stipend was really low. You're talking about, yeah. I have it. I actually have that on paper, that stipend from U.S. Soccer. After the Olympics, are you talking about the 90 World Cup qualifying team where
I'm talking about this going up to 88. Like you're out of college. You haven't done.
Yeah. So that one, getting over to Bournemouth, I was waiting for my work permit and everything, still playing 88 Olympic qualifiers. I got hit really hard in El Salvador in that one away game. And I remember being in Florida with Eric Eichmann, waiting for my re-entry back into England for my work permit. And I had actually signed a contract, and that was the beginning of January in that time, January 1988, I believe, where I got back to England and I started with Bournemouth at that time. So I had a pro contract myself right at that time before the Olympics. And then we came back in that summer, getting ready for the Olympics, the Tour in France and all those things. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure we had other players, Bruce Murray and all these other players that were underway, Peter Vermees and stuff. We had some really good players playing overseas, John Harkes to name a few.
Yeah. So, well,
but I can't say what they're making at that time, those guys having, playing at that time, but I know what I was making in Bournemouth. And But then we did have a stipend keeping that team together for the 90 World Cup after the Olympics, where they offered us stipends or contracts. They say stipends because they don't want to get to contracts at that time. Yeah. And so we did get paid to stay together for the 90 World Cup team. And that's another story. That's something that Americans in general, my belief now in retrospect, I know I should have done it. I should have stayed in England and kept playing club ball. But you have those things back then of just not knowing about, you're thinking out of sight, out of mind. They bring somebody else in for you. But the most important thing was to be playing regularly.
Yeah.
As we see today.
Well, I was only bringing up what the stipend might have been because Jeff Stock mentioned that he was on an Olympic contract in 79 or so when he signs with the Sounders, and it was about $1,000 a month. And I'm wondering, did it get any better? 8 years later, was it much better than that? And I guess that was
leading up to the 90 World Cup. It was better than that. It was probably $2,000 a month.
Okay. All right. Enough said. There's not a lot to distinguish between amateur and professional in the 80s U.S. National team compensation. Okay. So your Olympic experience, so you've qualified, and I believe you get past Canada, and you flipped the calendar to 88, and so it's not a long time between qualification and really the lead into the games, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And so you tour. It's a full close to what would be a full-time gig back then, correct? I mean, you're having periodic tournaments, right?
Well, and not really, because when we got into getting out of 87 into 88, there coming back from England at the end of the season, then you had the summer. In that summer break, we were on tour in France. I got injured really badly with my ankle, where I didn't think I was gonna get healthy enough to get back in the team in time for the Olympics in Korea. But I'm thankful for Bruce Snell, because the major indoor soccer league right there, you had Bruce Snell right there. He had gotten me, thank God, he had gotten me, was it at that time? He got me well enough going to him that I was able to play in the 88 Olympics at that time.
Okay.
But the turnaround in summer, not knowing what we were going to do, because I hadn't decided to go back to England yet at that time in 88.
Okay. So tell us about Jeff Durgan got, he was, when you talk about injuries and the timing of the games and everything's got to really just line up right. He was injured going into the 84 games, and I think only played a little over a half hour of game time. But tell me what it's like. I mean, the Olympic experience has got to be unique. You're part of a whole boatload of athletes going over there, and just take us through, getting your stuff sent to you, your gear, getting together with the team, transport. Take us through that.
Actually, I should send you a couple of my photos from that time. We leading up to that time, we had the Seagram Send the Family program. My mother couldn't go. Mr. Allison, my first coach, couldn't go, who was my mentor from, I only had one coach from 7 till I was 16 in the youth. And then my second was Frank Hall. And so I only had 2 through my whole youth in club soccer to that time. And so what happened was, I remember the Send the Family program, and my best friends there at the time, I have a few more, but in soccer, I had Grant Gibbs and Dale Mulholland. Now Dale's interesting because he was the first player to play in Russia. And so they came over to be with me in Korea, and the Send the Family program, they were in the Olympic Family Village. And so for me, I remember being there, and the experience was, off the charts. We didn't get to take part in the opening ceremonies because we're in another city at that time, getting ready for our group stage games and everything.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately we couldn't, but man, just being there during that time and being able to go to all the venues and meet all the people that I got to meet was, off the charts. I was hanging out with, Gabriella Sabatini. I have her Olympic gear from the gold medal match with Steffi Graf. That's how close we got during the Olympics, hanging out together. Yeah. She gave me that stuff because she wanted a jersey for somebody in her family from the U.S. team for soccer. And so, but I gotta take a step back at that time, getting over to the Olympics. I want to keep my train of thought because I got a couple different things going on here. And Frank, I lost my train of thought there for a second. I think I'm getting old.
Well, you were talking about swapping stuff with Gabby Sabatini, and you are mixing with the world's other athletes. I mean, that is just. Did you get family over there? Did anybody come and make up a entourage?
Yeah. So my a couple of my best friends were able to come over and support me during that time, and we were everywhere during that time. And that was the first time where Dale was able to contact the Olympic, the Russian team. That was the catalyst to get him over to Russia to play in the first division for Lokomotiv Moscow at that time. So it was really important because he's from Tacoma. We grew up together in
Yeah.
youth soccer, and for him to step out and do that. And then I remember the group stage. We played the first game against Argentina. We were up 1-0 all the way till the 80th minute. And then we gave away a penalty kick. I'm not going to say who gave up the penalty kick, John Harkes. No, and so we tied 1-1, and then we tied the host country, South Korea, 0-0. So going into the last game, we lost 4-2 in a shootout. I mean, Russia were tremendous at that time. And we lost 4-2 to Russia, and they ended up winning the gold medal. And so watching those games, being a part of that, going to watch the semifinals, finals, and watch Russia, Brazil, Germany, and those end games and everything. The quality, the standard was tremendous at that time, being able to be there live and watch that. And that's what I remember at that time. Oh, and now I got it, Frank. Now I got it. Right before we went to the Olympics, you asked about the Olympic team. The lead up, we met in Los Angeles, and I can't remember what hotel we're at. I don't want to say the wrong hotel name because they're probably the sponsor. And so we were in the hotel. I remember they had a whole wing for us. And we would walk through the wing with a shopping cart to every sponsor in every room. And we get all this sponsorship gear. And then we'd have it boxed and sent back to our homes. Some of the stuff we took with us, and some of the stuff like from Adidas and stuff for the Olympics, we had to keep, obviously. But we had all this stuff at that time. And my favorite story is going down through the wing and Carl Lewis coming up. And I'm like, Carl Lewis. And so I grab him, and I grab Eric Eichmann. I said, you know, I wanted a picture with him. And I had Eric Eichmann take a picture with him. And I said, Carl, you got to point at me. You got to point at me and say, you're the man. You're the man. I have that picture to this day, and I just love it. I love it. And those were highlights, being with, you know, FloJo. I got my picture with her and Roger Kingdom, Edwin Moses, the Howard sisters, you know. I mean, there was a lot of talent at that time there. Gwen Torrance, who ended up being world champion too.
Yeah. So it's not just a hotel for soccer, it's a hotel for the whole Olympic team.
It was for the whole Olympic team. And we flew over in 747s. And I actually sat on the plane with Janet Evans. She's this little tiny girl sitting next to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, whoa, the Russians, the East Germans and stuff. She won 7 gold medals. It shows you about technique and being, you know, just a master at your sport. Janet Evans she was off the charts. I mean, and she was so humble. She was incredible.
Were there other athletes from Washington that you ran into that were on that greater Olympic team?
Yes, there were. We had this thing afterwards. This thing, Frank, I almost don't want to talk about it, but it's so funny. I got this invite, and I have this stuff here still to this day, from a guru named Sri Chinmoy. Now he ended up, I know. And so he invited all the Olympic athletes from Washington State to go meet at the University of Washington. So I called Dale. I go, Dale, you got to go with me, man. So we head up to University of Washington with all the Olympics that took part, all the Olympians. And we had this presentation of him lifting up the world. This, you know, he had this platform and everything, went around the world doing this. Uh-huh. He ended up being the guru for Carl Lewis when he won the world championship in 1991 in, I think it was Tokyo, right? And then you see Sri Chinmoy, and you're like, that's that dude. That's that dude. You know, so we all got together at that time, but I can't remember all of their names, Frank. Okay. And Frank, you would have been laughing if we'd have met afterwards and spoke about this, or you'd been part of it. We'd have been looking at each other like, what just happened? I mean, what an experience.
Yeah, well, those are the highest profile athletes you could think of back then. Yeah, that was wild. So you get into that final day, and we're talking, it's not Russia, it's the Soviet Union. So it's really that amalgam of all the, they cherry picked everybody so that it's probably stronger than a Russian team. And you, as you mentioned, they do quite well in the tournament. So had you, is that where Dale gets his connection? Was it from that game? Is that when he met someone in the crowd or anything, or what?
Frank, we were soccer crazy. We go everywhere to try and find, you remember at that time, we didn't have anything. We had Toby Charles soccer made in Germany. You know, it was different back then. You didn't have development academy. You had Jeff Stock, Jeff Durgan, you know, guys like that coming out, Mark Peterson. These guys could play in any era at that time. They're playing today. They just kill it. Like, you think of the timing. Funny story about Jeff Stock, tour with FC Seattle or Seattle Storm. It was in Middlesbrough. He got subbed on. He took a guy out with a slide tackle, right?
Uh-huh.
Ref came over and Jeff says, "Hey, sorry, ref, I just got subbed in. My timing's off." That's Jeff Stock for you. And I thought that's one of the funniest lines I ever heard, right, Jeff? But those guys we were looking to them at that time, right? Yeah. And then when you look at Dale, we were like, how can we do this? He was out kicking the ball with Grant in the park. And you didn't have everybody geared up like you do today. So all the Russians were in a mishmash of uniforms and everything. He goes, "Hey, that's the Soviet team." He goes, so he walks in with them like he's one of the players into the hotel, right? And he gets in the hotel and he asks, he knew who to ask for. That blows my mind. He came down, met him and said, "Meet me later at so-and-so time and we'll discuss it." Huh. And that's how he started that conversation to get into the Soviet Union to play for Lokomotiv Moscow. And Dale's interesting because later, after playing in Hong Kong, Tel Aviv, being an agent, playing in Dukla Prague, first division in Europe, he came back and started the Seattle Sounders back up to what they are today with Scott Oakey.
It is. It's an interesting story how everything kind of comes back together and then it'll fray and it'll come back together. So on that, I don't know what the expectations were for an American national team at an international tournament back then, but you guys were in it. You know, if somehow you can pull off something against Soviet Union, you advance. You don't. But would you say they did as well as what was it?
12th.
Yeah,
12th in the tournament. I don't know how many teams were in it, but we were, like you said, we were that close. And I don't think everybody I didn't truly understand what it meant to get through group play at that time, not having been in group play except for Olympic qualification. Mm-hmm. But then getting through group play right there and how close we were, you know, we get 3 points against Argentina. That would have been a really strong showing, especially in that group. Yeah. Argentina, South Korea, and the Soviet Union. That was a tough group. We did extremely well. But go ahead, Frank, please.
Well, I was going to ask, it's in Asia, and you've got the time difference, but also this is pre-YouTube, pre-proliferation of cable channels. And I know that we didn't see any 84 Olympic soccer games at all. How many people got to see you back home on TV?
I remember my family seeing me on NBC, I think it was, you know, waving my hand, you know, to game here and there, and then the closing ceremonies. If you ever look at the closing ceremonies and watch those clips, you'll see me in the inner circle running around, being in the camera here, being there and everything. I mean, it was exciting. But other than that, it's not like it is today. You're correct.
So what'd you do? What'd you do between the third match and then the closing ceremonies? Could you be a fan?
Yeah, we had tickets right there. I mean, you have the room where you have to go and get tickets. We signed up for what events we want to go to, and we had a contingent of tickets. I mean, I remember meeting Greg Louganis right there, you know, and saying, "Whoa," because on TV everybody looks taller and all these things, and seeing people for their regular height. You know, I remember Karch Karai, you know, all these guys going to watch. I went and watched swimming. I went and watched soccer, tennis. I told you those matches. Yeah. And all kinds of stuff. I was everywhere. I'll tell you, swimming was interesting for their team spirit, the way they would go and support each other. It was off the charts at that time. That later on being a pro coach, it really makes you think about that team spirit. Even though, you know, as a player, it's different than being a coach, being responsible for everybody. So it was a great time for all those different experiences that way. So I remember Jim Abbott too. I have his training top from U.S. baseball, for example, and meeting him in Itaewon with Brent and Dale, him and a couple of guys, and he wanted a jersey, and I gave him a training jersey from USA for his brother.
Yeah.
And he said, here's my jacket from US Baseball. I was like, great, Jim Abbott. I was like, I mean, those types of things happen and they're off the charts. So I have it from Jim Abbott, Gabriella Sabatini, her gold medal. Excuse me, she got the silver. She lost to Steffi Graf. But in the gold medal match, I have her outfit with her shirt, her tracksuit from Argentina, her shoes that she played in, everything, at that time. Yeah.
I bet they got some, if I'm interviewing Steffi Graf and Sabatini, I bet they've got some Brent Goulet stories to share, but another time.
Not Steffi, but Gabriella, who was that weird guy? Yeah, at the time. Yeah.
Hey, so you've glossed over one thing, well, a couple of things, but here, as we close, I want you to think back. You played Argentina, you played the home team, so that's got to be an experience. You also score. So tell us what, when you think Olympics, and I know there's all this Hollywood aspect to it of seeing everybody else, but what really strikes you, and what do you think about when you close your eyes and think of the 88 games?
Well, I remember in those games, I really wanted to score so bad, being a goal scorer. I wanted to score so bad. We get to the third game and I'm like, the game's getting later and later. And I remember run up the right side. You see Desmond Armstrong in that clip running up the right side with that world-class speed of his. You see the ball going from right over to Ricky Davis making a fake, the guy biting, coming in, laying off a pass. And this one, that one's actually on YouTube. I had a guy from NFL Films, Brandon Bather. He put together this old thing from some videos, and it looks funny on YouTube. But it says my career goals, a few of them, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes across from right to left, I have to hit it with my right first time. Frank, if I would have let it go to my left foot, I would have never got it off. He has closed me down so fast. But I that's one of the best shots I've ever hit in my life, hitting it coming across with my right foot and driving it far post. Anybody in pro sports will tell you in soccer how hard that shot is to hit. And so I remember just all my being wanting to score at the Olympics so bad at that time. And then the relief of having done it, because I think Russia, they had dominated us. And that helped us come back. It was 4-1, 4-2. Yeah. John Doyle scored. I just missed that one. Goalie comes out a little, I come out, and we froze each other. I could have got my toe on it, maybe got that one, but John Doyle got that one. Give it to Johnny, right? And so when I think of that, and just that whole thing with all, like you said, you got the cream of the crop, and you're looking at the percentages, and I'm looking back at Tacoma, Washington. I'm thinking, how did I get here? By the grace of God, being a born again Christian today, I look back on that in retrospect, Frank, and I think, how did I get there with all of the players in the USA that I'm able to represent my country and be there for my country? And I'm proud of that to this day, because once an Olympian, always Olympian. And we had some great players coming out of our youth system back then. We just named a few with Mark Peterson, Jeff Stock, Jeff Durgan. There were others. I'm sorry if I can't name them all right now, but they're tremendous, coming out for us to be able to see them as Americans at that time.
Well, we're so proud of all you guys, but we're proud of what you represent to us. I mean, you've been breaking barriers and really and entertaining us, but you've just done it at the top level, Brent, and we thank you. We thank you for this conversation today, sharing your story, and so good to see you. Well, that's it. Thanks to our producer, Leanne Johnson, and thanks to all of you for watching our Conversation with a Legend Olympic edition with Brent Goulet. For more on the history of Washington State soccer and to learn more about the Washington State Legends of Soccer, go to wassoccerlegends.org. We'd appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.